Do, 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 do. We're coming live a little bit early, but that's because I've got the time to be here early this morning. Did all the chores, finished all the cooking, coffee and tabletop. I agree, Babylonia. Hey, you know what I need to do this morning before we get going? Because I just remembered I need to move the um, chat box over so that y'all can see when people are chatting. I don't really have a good place for it with this color and everything else, but let's just put it over here and see how that goes. So theoretically, we should be able to see the chat box over to the right now. I realized during the last couple of live streams, because I did this whole column as a new thing in 2023, and I haven't live streamed a lot of games this year so far. I'm streaming much less. I was streaming every single day throughout 2022, and I've backed off and I'm streaming maybe 2, 3 times a week now. Game stuff, usually just when I have free time. And then, of course, the Sundays. Boy, I forgot the chat box is on the left hand side underneath this column. So the last 2 Sundays, everybody's chat, which I answer, hasn't been visible to the people who watch the playback because it was underneath this column. So we're going to fix that now. It's over on the right hand side. So yes, Babylonia says, coffee and tabletop, the only way to roll. And let's see if that shows up. It should show up. All right. What's up, everybody? You should be able to hear me all right. Everything looks good on my end. Okay. Welcome. Good morning. It is January something. 29th, 2022. We're going to recap this week in tabletop and just talk about other stuff as well. You never know what pops up during these live stream discussions as people have things to discuss. But the first thing on the agenda, of course, is the ORC 1.0A and the Creative Commons stuff that happened a couple days ago now. It seems like forever ago, but this is really recent. And of course, the SRD 5.1 getting put into the open. We're also going to be talking about Critical Role's massive announcement with Amazon Prime Studios and their big multi-year exclusivity deal. We've got Paizo talking about their intentions moving forward, continuing with the OGL. We've also got Paizo talking about selling 8 months worth of books in 2 weeks. Some news about Roll20. The video for this one went live this morning, so I probably won't cover too much of this one because it's already out there in video format, fresh and from this morning. And of course, the European RPG Studios Union. We'll probably talk about some other stuff along the way. Depends on what questions people have as we get going. But in the meantime, I think the big news for everyone was the OGL 1.0A and SRD 5.1 discussion that happens this week. So the big thing was the SRD got put into Creative Commons, and it is a win. It's not a total victory, and it's very frustrating to see so many of the people out there who can't graciously take a win and who are it's not enough. Wizards of the Coast, it's not enough. You need to do this. We need to. I think it's been a hard couple of weeks for everybody. Um, I can't say that I'm going to put all the blame in one place because Wizards of the Coast is an entity with lots of employees, and something I hadn't considered until Slandered Gaming did a video about it the other day was it is a win in one area, but it's also a loss because Hasbro laid off 1,000 people um, across the company, and in today's economy, 1,000 people losing their jobs is not a good thing. Obviously, everyone wants the leadership to hang for what they did, right? That's the outcome that most of the rage-filled people have is no, we need Wizards of the Coast management to burn. We need Hasbro's management to burn. But the unfortunate reality is when a company goes into cost management measures, it's very rarely the management who takes the hit or the executives. It's almost always the common man. And so this might be a win on one front, but it's not a total victory because A, 1,000 people lost their jobs, and not all of that is related to Wizards of the Coast. Hasbro had declining stock before that because of all the Magic the Gathering stuff, but it is a factor in. I gotta get comfortable. I'm gonna do this like I'm doing one of my console streams. I've literally got my feet up on that chair, and I'm just gonna lean back and talk. So, and on the other front too, a lot of people have said, like, yeah, well, you guys got 5th edition rules in the Creative Commons, but what about first edition and second edition, and what about 3.5? Why aren't those rules in open source Creative Commons? And it's not enough. Wizards of the Coast needs to do all the things. When, in a perfect world, maybe, and who knows what is coming down the pipeline, because I guarantee you, based on what has happened over the last 2 weeks, heads will roll. We don't know who or how or what yet, but you know, things will change because of this. This was such a monumental, you know, shitstorm that every media outlet on the planet picked up on it. Like mainstream news was picking up on this and reporting on it because it's not just something that's within the gaming industry. It became this global scandal. And you don't just walk away from that. So the damage has been done, and we did win on multiple fronts. Unfortunately, a lot of people lost their jobs, not the right people. And it is what it is. So we'll continue to monitor the situation and see what happens as a result of it. We did win in the sense that we got 5th edition rules free of Wizards of the Coast. Now, to all the people who are saying, yeah, but we didn't get 3.5, that's okay. It's a win for now, because here's the reality. Whether you are, I like second edition AD&D. That's my preferred rule set, right? But I recognize that I am in a tiny fraction of a percent of people who prefer that rule set to others. 5th edition, whether you like it or not, I am not here to argue with people who are like, it's a bad system. Whatever. Um, 5th edition is the most well known, the most played, the easiest to get into of all the tabletop rule sets out there. And for that reason, 5th edition became this massive thing over the past, however many years it's been now, since 2014 or something, I forget. It's been a hot minute that 5th edition has been out. So that being the most popular edition, it makes sense for Wizards of the Coast to give that out there and say, okay, this should placate everybody that's upset while we regroup and figure out what our next steps are. They might be good steps, they might be bad steps. We can't know. I'm not going to prejudge them. Um, and I'm also not someone. There's a lot of people out there who are going back to like 20 years ago and going, "Yeah, Wizards of the Coast already did this before, and they're doing it." The previous leadership did it. I'm not going to lay the sins of the fathers at the feet of the sons. It's previous management screwed up. They're no longer here. Why aren't they? Because they screwed up, right? So it's like these things work themselves out in the long run. Um, but 5th edition rules are out there in the wild now for free, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand the magnitude of. I know a lot of people are still focused on, well, they didn't say that they were going to make the 1.0A OGL irrevocable. They just said they're making the rule set out there and irrevocable. I don't think that they're going to mess. This is my personal opinion. I don't think they're going to touch the OGL 1.0A anymore. I think what they're going to do, because they literally came out and said, we are not going to deauthorize it. We're going to leave it in place as is untouched. I would say what they're going to do is they're going to focus on 1.2 being for 6th edition and only 6th edition and everything moving forward. And if that's what they want to do, that's what everyone said they should have done in the first place. You should have never tried to touch the 1.0A OGL. It was clear from the beginning that that was open forever free. We didn't need the word irrevocable because it already had language in there to suggest that it was permanent. So if they want to focus on that for 1D&D and beyond, that's great. Focus on that. Focus on making the best version of Dungeons and Dragons rules and source books that have ever existed, and let that be your calling card to get new people in, right? So they can do that if they want. But the SRD, I wanna cover this a little bit this morning, because the SRD being in the public is a massive thing. Babylonian says the reality is that first and second edition are already in the public domain by default. The existence of dozens, if not hundreds, of OSR games prove this by definition. Yep, I know that that's the case. I also know that there is trepidation because people who want to use those rule sets are scared because TSR was famously litigious um, over those rule sets, and I think people have been a little trepidatious to test those waters and to publish things under those. Um, But it is what it is. I mean, that stuff's out there. The best thing about a license is that you don't have to use their license. You could literally take second edition AD&D, the rule set, and just tweak a couple of things here and there and make it completely unique. By modifying it for homebrew, you've probably made it unique enough to have its own product identity. So, in any case, the SRD 5.1, which is 5th edition, is now being it's under the terms of Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License, which is pretty good. Every single news outlet on the planet that has covered this has talked about how this is a win for everybody and it's a surrender by Wizards of the Coast. Now, it does mean that there's some attribution that is required, but that's no different than the attribution that was required under the OGL 1.0a. You just got to put a link to things. And for those who want to dive into the deep dive, there's at the beginning of the SRD 5.1, there is a link to the Creative Commons 4.0, a link to the SRD, and a link to the Creative Commons licenses legal codes that you can link to it. Okay. Let's talk for a minute about how amazing it is to have the 5th edition SRD in the wild now, right? So my wife never played. Matter of fact, hey Chris, she might not be able to hear me. I'm gonna have her come in here real quick. Now Chris isn't gonna have a microphone, but where do you want to sit? Where do you want to sit? Just want to sit here on the bed for a minute. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions, so Chris, I need to move the camera up a little bit so everyone can see Chris. There's Chris. Good morning. This isn't going to be perfect, everybody, because we're doing this impromptu, so deal with it. You had never played tabletop before we started. Well, it was like a year and a half, something like that, with the Lost Mines of Fendelver, which was the first time you had ever played tabletop in your life. You played for roughly a year and a quarter, and everything you learned was 5th edition. So this is the question I want to ask. If anybody has any other questions for Chris while she's sitting here, feel free to ask them. But my question for you is, did you find anything about learning tabletop to be difficult? Did you find any of it difficult to learn? Like the races or the classes or the rules? I'm not talking Fantasy Grounds. That's slightly different because she had to learn Fantasy Grounds and she had to learn a rule set at the same time. So maybe I don't know if we can answer that question easily. What was more difficult, learning the rules or learning Fantasy Grounds? How to use Fantasy Grounds? Like the rules, but you picked it up pretty quickly. Like I think the only thing extra was when we did the started doing like the extra sneak attack, because the first campaign she played a ranger. You didn't have any problems with the ranger. It was just shoot, and then I think the only time you did was when you tried to use one of the spells that so English is not Christina's first language, and it was one of the ranger abilities, which like does this thing where you cast a spell on an arrow, and then you shoot the arrow into the crowd, and then it does like an AOE effect, but it has friendly fire, and you shot into the middle of this encounter, and like I think the three of the group was in in the area that that got hit. Um, but how quickly do you think you became comfortable playing? Like within the first 3 months, within the first 6 months? I'm putting her on the spot. She's very nervous right now because I literally just pulled her in here. 4 months. She said she was she felt comfortable after about 4 months. Um, that's pretty good. And knowing 5th edition, because that's all you've ever played is 5th edition. Do you remember? And I'm asking a stupid question now, but I want to ask a stupid question. Do you remember how many dice you had to use? The different types of dice? There's the 20. Ah, the 3d6. Or the 1d6, sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then doing multiples. So, because of the way that we play, the way I used the 5e system in the past, it's a hybrid system. So the only thing she ever had to learn was the roll the 20 and whatever you need to roll for damage, right? And then I use d6 a lot for flavor. So it's like, hey, this happened, roll a d6 to see if anything additional happens, and then based on what the d6 roll is, we then have a role play scenario. So d20, d6. You played a ranger the first time. You played a rogue the second time, like the boat captain. Um, which was funner? Did you like the ranger more or the boat captain more? Or you like both equally well? Okay. Which was easier for you? The boat captain, yeah. Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot. I know you were busy with your TikTok and coffee. Oh, you were eating breakfast? Man, I totally feel like an ass now. I just was like, come in here, quick! Oh, you were almost done? Alright. Well, thank you. I'm gonna go back to streaming and talking about D&D and D and stuff. So about 4 months to get up to speed. Okay. Oh, yeah, the big thing was English. Like, yeah, it's a little trickier. Like, I'm the same way in Spanish. If I had to try to play Dungeons and Dragons in Spanish, I might be okay. I might be okay if I'm sitting down and reading the book. But if I was in an online session like you were doing, yeah, I'd be lost. I'd be like, what? I don't know what that term means. And I think that was something because she was often running Google Translator on the side to understand some of the words in Lost Mines of Phandelver. Because when you're reading the dialogue, they use archaic dialect and stuff. And so and then she was reading ahead sometimes, trying to figure out what was going to go on. All right. Well, Martin says, I remember my first D&D game, the old D&D. My first was on first edition, yeah. Bubbaloni says, Chris was the D&D Commander Shepard. D&D Commander Shepard, love it, yeah. All right, well, thank you. I'll go back to reading. Enjoy the rest of your breakfast. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt your stuff. All right, everybody. She hates it when I put her on the spot. She's gonna tell me after we're done. I guarantee you, she'll tell me after we're done. Why did you give me a list of questions that you were gonna ask me? And I was like, because I never know until it's just I do stuff on the spot like that a lot. Um, I would argue that for Chris, the hardest part was she just said the hardest part was the rules. I don't think um, that any person who comes into tabletop for the first time is going to have a different answer. No matter what system you're playing, the rules are going to be the most challenging thing that you have to learn to be able to play. I would argue, and I would need to talk to her further to confirm this, but I would argue that part of the issue for her was learning Fantasy Grounds at the same time that she was learning how to play tabletop for the very first time. So it's not just, oh, here's the rules, learn how to throw some dice. It was, here's how you need to make this system work. Double click this, drag and drop this, click this to expand this, do this to enter your character manual, go here to see this character sheet data, use this to move your character, blah, 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 blah. So you're learning essentially two things on top of each other. And I got to say, for anybody who watched the evolution of Chris from our first ever session 0 like a year and a half ago to where we ended up in December or late November, early December of last year, you will watch her progress infinitely to where during the first few months she's asking lots of questions. How do I make this work? How does this work? How does this work? And then by the third, fourth month, she stopped asking questions and she was just getting into the actual play session because it took her a while. It would be very interesting to do a case study to see how much of the difficulty for her was Fantasy Grounds versus the 5th edition rule set. Because I can say from having played multiple editions of Dungeons and Dragons over the years. 5th edition is by far the most simplified, easy rule set I've ever used. There's no crunchiness to it whatsoever. It is streamlined so that you can get in, learn how to play, and just go from there. Um, and I think that, at least from my perspective, that's part of what made it so that she could get into playing tabletop for the first time because she's never played before. Because I'm going through the Starfinder book right now and I'm reading up on the rules, and I see parts of it that confuse me because I've never played the Starfinder system before. And I'm looking at this stuff going, I love my wife to death, but I also know her. There is no way that she would want to learn all of those rules. There's no way that she would want to do that because for her, tabletop is a hobby. She doesn't mind playing once a week. She cosplayed the whole time we played for a year and a half. She doesn't mind doing the, dress up and pretend and play once a week thing. But she doesn't like to do any additional reading because she doesn't have a lot of time. And it's mostly just to placate me because she knows it's something I'm super passionate about. So I love her to death. Yes, fantasy. So, hang on. Difficulty once you do it once, trying difficult systems is easier and fun. I think FGU is more difficult. I can roll 20 FGU and Foundry. FGU is more difficult. FGU has a higher learning curve. I will admit that for sure. Because we played Rail. She didn't. I played Roll 20 before, and Roll 20 was really easy to get into. They're making it even better. Actually, we have an announcement here. We're going to be going over the Roll 20 and One Bookshelf stuff today. Hell, why don't we just cover that while we're on the topic? Then we'll go back to the SRD. Roll20 was already fairly easy, but one of the reasons we went with Fantasy Grounds was because they had the. I looked at Foundry VTT, saw some stuff I liked, but I didn't see enough of the things that I thought I needed. And when my brother and I really got into the research, we looked at Fantasy Grounds and said, okay, it's got a learning curve, but it's got a ton of tutorials out there, and we can buy these official books and official modules. They plug in right away. We don't have to do any importation, anything else. It was really easy for us to get up to speed and put everything together in a VTT scenario. So Fantasy Grounds was what worked for us. Now there was some learning, and there's going to be relearning because everything I learned for Fantasy Grounds over a year and a half was to play 5th edition. And when I loaded up the Starfinder when I loaded up the Starfinder rule set last night into Fantasy Grounds, to take that screenshot I put out on the community section here on YouTube, I literally was going through everything going, oh, I'm going to have to relearn the UI for this rule set, and there's all these different rules that I don't know anything about yet, and so I'm looking at all the things that are across the UI going, well, shit, I'm gonna have to. It's gonna be a new learning curve here. So one of the reasons that and I hope this is still going. I can't find any recent information about this merger between Roll20 and One Bookshelf. But this was announced late last year, like summertime, late summer of last year, July, August. It was announced that Roll20 and One Bookshelf were planning a merger, and I believe the Roll20 CEO is going to remain the CEO, and One Bookshelf CEO is going to become the president, is what the merger said, I believe. Um, Roll20's growth was massive in 2022. They went from 2 million users to 10 million users in 1 year. That's an increase of 8 million users. That is that is so many levels of magnitude of growth. Roll20 is just king of the VTT space. I don't think it hasn't been the most what's the best way to say this? In my opinion, I don't think that Roll20 has provided all the tools that a DM like myself wants. So here's an example. One of the things I was very frustrated with right away with Roll20 was even with a paid subscription, I was given a limit on the size and how much of the things that I could upload for resources. And when you're doing homebrew, I have maps out the wazoo that need to be uploaded. And they're big maps because I have these things in 8K resolution so that we can. And I very quickly find out that I wasn't going to be able to upload 8K resolution maps to Roll20, even paying at the tier we were at. I don't know if they've changed this or not, but at the time, this was around mid 2021 was the last time I played on Roll20. They had a limit, even paying a subscription. And I had to downsize my VTT maps to get them at a resolution that Roll20 would support because they were like, no, that's too big of a file size. You can't do that. Fantasy Grounds, I can upload whatever the fuck I want. Like I haven't found a limit yet. If there is a limit, I don't know what it is because I haven't come across it yet. But I can do anything I want with Fantasy Grounds, which is one of the reasons I went with that for our homebrew solution. Now, um, this merger, one of the things they've talked about, and I the video's out from this morning. I don't want to spend too much time on this topic because you could just go watch the video I published today at 6 a.m. about the merger. One of the things in there was this whole drag and drop. Um, where's it at here? They talk about how. Yep, I think it's right here. Dun, 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 dun. Here it is. Essentially what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to drag and drop PDFs into Roll20 into a running game. Once the file uploads, Roll20's interface then runs a virus scan on it and then populates it within the game's library as a usable asset. And that was something where it says if all the processes will be just as seamless, users can expect a few of the rough edges that come with playing tabletop RPGs online and enjoy systems that. That's one of the reasons I've liked Fantasy Grounds as an example, is because when I buy a module and I install it, it's there. Like I don't have to do any work at all. The encounters are set up, the NPCs are there, all of the maps are there. I can do all these different things with the maps, and when the traps are there, the doors are there, the locked things are there. Everything that I need is in the module. And to manually input a PDF into Fantasy Grounds right now, I have to do a lot of back end work. And I had an interesting conversation with someone recently who I'm going to be doing a Foundry BTT experience with in a couple of weeks to see Starfinder being played live. And thanks to them for giving me the opportunity to do that so I could further learn the system. But we were discussing, Foundry VTT because I've never played with it, and he was just walking me through some things. And he was talking about how he manually inputs everything and takes the time. Now they're only playing once every 2 weeks, so he's got the time to put into importing all of that stuff manually and making it look good for his players. And I don't have the time for that, so I'm more than happy to pay the $25 or whatever it is to just get the module that's ready to go. And what I didn't know until just recently, because I'm getting into Starfinder and everything else, is that Paizo actually has this thing where you can link your account to your Fantasy Grounds account, and you can then, if you've bought the PDF on Paizo, you get a discount off of the purchase price on Fantasy Grounds. And if you've paid for it already on Fantasy Grounds, you get it for free over on Paizo, so you're not double paying. That didn't exist with Roll20 the last time I was aware. If I bought something on Roll20, I still had to buy it from like Wizards of the Coast as an example. But I haven't looked in, I was only playing Dungeons and Dragons products at the time, and I don't know what has changed with D&D Beyond. Anyway, the big takeaway for me from the Roll20 thing was being able to import a PDF and have it auto populate. And I was like, that's freaking brilliant, because if they can get that to work, then that's one less thing that I have to do. Also, I want to take a quick moment to shout out to Bubbleonia Rising. Thanks for the $10 super chat, Bubbleonia. I really appreciate the support. Also, Bubbleonia is a member. You know that because he's got different colored text and an icon next. So thanks for the support also as a member, sir. Let's read some chat. Bubbleonia says, oh, let's go. Martin had one up there. He says, both Foundry and FGU are really powerful. I've heard good things about Foundry. I just have never tried it because at this point I'm a few $100s into Fantasy Grounds, and I've been using it for a couple of years now. I'm comfortable with it. I'm not intimately knowledgeable about it, but I am comfortable with it enough to run it. Yeah. Bubbleoni says, nothing but respect for anyone who learns TTRPGs as an adult, let alone in their non-native language. A lot of us learn at a very young age in our first language. Yes. So Chris is pretty amazing. For anyone, not everyone's been around a long time. Our channel's a long time. So Chris and I have been doing stuff in the public eye for more than a decade. With our travel blog and traveling around the world and working with different tourism agencies and being influencers in the travel space as well as public speakers. We were always in the public eye. Chris, there's one thing Chris is not afraid to do. Chris is not afraid to try new things, and usually she gets a hold of them pretty quick. She's still not a gamer, but she has tried World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, Lord of the Rings Online. She's tried those because she's seen me enjoying them and wanted to try them and has enjoyed them. She tried Red Dead Online, really loved Red Dead Online. She sucks at shooting, and she admits that she sucks at shooting, but she still just likes to go jump on a horse and like ride around and try to shoot at birds and deer. It's very cute and funny, but um, Chris likes to learn things, which is awesome. Martin says, my first language is French. There you go. Yeah. I use Fantasy Grounds for Starfinder. It's the one that has the best development, but it is not well maintained. I don't know enough about it because I haven't. We're currently, I guess I can say this here. I haven't made an official announcement on the channel yet, but I can say it here as sort of an official announcement. So I've made no secret that all this OGL stuff has at the very least gotten me out to start exploring lots of other systems and things that I had never explored before. And when I started looking at Pathfinder versus Starfinder, even though I've played the Owlcat games and I'm familiar with fantasy enough to be able to more quickly and more easily get up to speed on Pathfinder, I really wanted to do something different. So I was like, I'm going to go read the Starfinder book. And I'm just loving everything I'm reading so far. And then I started looking at the adventure paths, and it was like, oh my, they've got, what kind of adventure do you want that you could do? I don't have to do homebrew. I can literally go do this. And so I talked to my brother, and he was like, yeah, for sure. And then we got one of our community members, Gila, who sometimes is here in chat. Um, he was like, hey, if you guys are gonna play, I wouldn't mind getting involved. And then my brother's got a couple of his buddies that he's known since like grade school, who we've played MMORPGs with them in the past. They were part of the playtest group for our world, for our campaign, the first campaign module that comes with our source book. That's the Escape from Parthana module, which is levels 1 to 4. They were part of the playtest group and Patreon subscribers back in August of 2021. So at some point in the near future, I'd say within the next month or so, we're going to be starting a Starfinder live stream campaign here on my channel. No timeline yet. We're still doing a lot of stuff, but that's, I've been getting up to speed with what they have through Fantasy Grounds, what it looks like, the interface, and everything else. And then I think we're going to pick up it's Fly or Die. Fly Free or Die is the adventure path, and the first one is like We're No Heroes or something like that. It's a level 1 to level 4 1 to 4 adventure that teaches you the basics of the game, the basics of ship combat, and it's basically like you're a Firefly crew, the Serenity crew. It's a crew of dudes on a ship. So we're gonna try that. Ben Jones says there are plenty of non-intuitive exception rules in 5th edition. Just look at the RPG Stock Exchange. I have no idea what the RPG Stack Exchange is. Excuse me. There are plenty of simple rules, just as Fate, for instance. I mean, maybe there are. I don't know. It doesn't. For me, 5th edition has always been the easiest. And whenever I hear someone say that 5th edition is not that great and all this other stuff, it had an 85% market share. That's not just marketing dollars at work. That's accessibility. That's ease of use. That's it being a very seamless, streamlined, easy to get into uh, rule set. 5th edition was very, very good at that, and I'm not going to say anything bad about it because I think 5th edition, it's not my favorite, but I think it's great. Dun, 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 dun. Martin says that's the reason I changed to FGGU and Foundry no limits. Yes, I need no limits for my homebrew stuff. 10,000 map by FGU. That's a big map. Foundry for PF2 has a module that takes you. Hang on, that takes your bot. Takes you bot A PF to an adventure. Takes a minute, and the whole adventure is there. For Starfinder, I prefer the FGU just because of the same reason you just sold. I buy the AP at discount. Adventure Paths are really cool. We love the Aeon Emperor and Dead Suns. Cool. So I didn't know. Normally, what I do, what I've done for years, is I do homebrew. It is very rare for me to have run Adventure Paths. I have not run Adventure Paths since 2nd edition AD&D. That's how long ago was the last time I ran Adventure Paths, which would have been early 90s, early mid 90s when I was, into the late 90s, I suppose, because 1999 was when I created my first world. I was 19 years old. I created the world of the Saga of Leucemia. That was 1999. And since 1999, I have focused on homebrew. And that's one of the reasons I loved the AD&D system and learned that because I had all the books. I still have all the books in storage at my sister's place in Colorado. Like I have all the books, all the faux red leather class guides and everything else. I have all my miniatures and probably 20 sets of dice. I used to paint those little pewter miniatures. I've got tons of miniatures. Um, that was a big part of my life for a long time, but I've always loved building my own worlds. And that came into where we're at currently with our World of the Weave and the Void. But with learning a new system like Starfinder, I didn't want to do homebrew. I looked at it and went, I need to find something that looks like it's going to be fun that I can just run. Because what I really wanted to do was play as a player, and I didn't find anybody that was DMing. I spent like the last 3 weeks trying to find DMs, and it didn't work out. So I was like, screw it, I'm just going to run one myself. I've been once a DM, always a DM, I suppose, because I'm 30 plus years into DMing, and I'm doing it again. Um, but what was really cool is when I went onto the website for Paizo's website and I started looking at all the adventure paths, I was like, holy shit, there's like, I don't know, 50, 60 adventure paths that by now I don't even know how many adventure paths there are. There are a ton. And I started looking at them all. I'm like, oh my God. So each adventure path is broken down into these like chapters, which are books. And it does feel like, I mean, I understand where it's at. If you're coming into it late like I am, it looks like a monumental, and it is expensive. It can get expensive very quick when each thing is $20 for the PDFs. And I'm not doing physical. I'm not doing physical right now. I'm only doing there's a reason for that, by the way. Chris and I bought our homestead in October of 2021, moved here in March of 2022, and we have been buckled down getting this place modernized and everything else. One of the components of that was it took 9 months to get the paperwork from the home sale. So she did all the initial paperwork in October of 2021. Then we got everything late, summer 2022, got all the paperwork. Then we had to go apply for a direction because this place didn't have an address. It didn't have an address. So we had to go apply for an address. Then we got the address. Then we had to take that and go around to the various it was chaos. We had to get all this stuff approved. We had to, do this song and dance to get all these things filled out to get an address assigned here. Then I had to get the address into Google Maps. And that was another process of getting things into Google Maps and having Google Maps approve it because on Google Maps there is no outline for a building where we live. So it doesn't register that there is no box shape where our home is located because the last time Google Maps was through here was forever ago, the car. So that was another process. Well, we finally got our address like 2 weeks ago. I literally just placed my first test Amazon order, I think on Sunday. Not today's Sunday, sorry. Was it yesterday or Friday? A couple days ago. Finally did our first test order. So now I'm waiting to see if I'm going to get something through Amazon or not without any hiccups because, a year and a half after we bought the place, we finally have an address that we can ship things through. So I've been remote only, VTT only for a long time. Anyway, so yeah, going back to the homebrew stuff. One of the reasons I think this is such a big deal to have the SRD out in the open now is because before, if you wanted to do homebrew, you needed to own the books, and this is independent of um, and I'm saying before, meaning before the internet, because once the internet, even if you didn't own the books, there's plenty of places you can get free PDFs on the internet. I'm not going to mention them. Some of them are legit, some of them are not so legit. Some of them may or may not be things that you should support. But there are lots of ways to get PDFs in the current era. Um, but in any case, for many years back in the day, you had to have a book to be able to do it. Well, now that's just out there in the open with the 5th edition rules. So anyone out there can go take these rules, which have it's the basic structure that you would need to run a fantasy homebrew campaign without needing to create anything on your own. Everything's here. The only thing you need to come up with is the lore. The races are here, all the racial traits for dwarves and elves and halflings and dragonborns and humans and gnomes and half-elves and tieflings and half-orcs. And then you've got all the basic classes, barbarians, bards, druids, clerics, all these other things are all here, including everything you would ever need. There is so much work that has to be done to create all of this stuff from scratch. And so having a rule set that you can easily rely upon makes it very easy for people to get a homebrew world up to speed. So if you want to, you can. And now it's freely available in Creative Commons, which is the coolest thing ever. I mean, it was an unexpected thing, and it's interesting to me because I don't know that this would have ever had happened had we not had the controversy. So even though the controversy is bad and 1,000 people lost their jobs, and there's a lot of shittiness that is around the table about all these different things, we're getting the ORC Alliance out of this. We're getting the RPG ESU. We're getting these mergers happening. We got the SRD in Creative Commons. That's huge news. Anyway, really quickly, I want to bounce back to the Starfinder modules. When I was researching those and looking at those, I was like, oh, so these are like little adventures that can be run in like, 10, 12 hours per book in an adventure path. So if each one's, if there's if there's 6 books in an adventure path, we've got that's a year's worth of campaigns. We're playing once a week. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to be doing something soon, and I'm really glad that those resources are out there because I've not done an official module from somebody else, with the exception of the Lost Mine of Phandelver. We did run the Lost Mine of Phandelver. I forgot about that one, but that was because I needed to learn Fantasy Grounds, and so we used that as our training wheels module to learn Fantasy Grounds. We went and played Lost Mine of Phandelver. All right. Dun, dun, dun. Let's look here at the comments. I still have mine's also old AD&D books. Yeah. Babylonia says, I've been homebrewing since a kid. I've played published modules, but only ran a handful ever. For me, the world building is everything. I like world building. Speaking of world building, I've got a video coming out on Monday morning. It's about an hour long, but I go into tabletop world building. It's the first like documentary style I've done on this channel where I talk about all the work that we have put into this, what it took to get that book out the door. So it takes everybody from napkin sketches to the incarnate map making into playtesting, everything we did to get our source book and our first module out the door. So it's Tabletop World Building 101 from napkin sketches to published source book. That video is out Monday morning. I recorded that like 2 days ago. I just outlined this morning, I outlined an incarnate map making series. So I'm going to be doing like a 6 to 10 part series here on YouTube, showing how I use incarnate for map making and world building, because I don't just use it for the tabletop maps. I also use it for the maps for the point and click game. We use it for maps for some other stuff we've got going on. And then there's another project we have, which is a creative project, which tells a story using these 2D images, and we're using Incarnate for that project as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can use Incarnate. So I'll have a series coming out on that. Because for me, yes, world building is everything. I mean, I've been a professional writer now since 2008, making a living with words, and that's one of the things I always wanted to do as a child was create worlds, and thankfully I've been able to do that for a long time now. Martin says there's not a lot of GMs for Starfinder. When I need a new player, it takes just a few hours. Yeah, that's the thing. Like there's just not enough DMs out there. I'm okay with that. There's a part of me though that just wants to play, and it's like I need to just secretly teach my brother how to DM so that I can be the player. Welcome to the channel, Chris Thomas. Cthulhu is so cool. I just die all the time. I just don't have the bandwidth to run Starfinder. We're deep into my homebrew. Yeah, the Cthulhu setting for me, it's interesting, but not for me. Ben Jones says no experience in D&D is crunchy. That's why I love it. Looking forward to reading your work. Such relief. I feel like I'm coming back to life and reading the blanket off books. There you go. Martin says I played 5th edition for a while, but went back to another system. Not because it was a bad system, because the width of the choices is smaller than other systems. Yep. Bologna says I can't wait. The video will be super helpful to me as I contemplate transitioning my campaign to published work for COC. Yeah, I don't go into too much of the legal side of things, but at the very least, it should be an informational video on what it takes to get a world ready. I think the only thing I didn't cover was the sheer amount of artwork, but I feel like that was a separate topic than world building, because what I wanted to do, and I talk about this in the videos, is recently because I started recently looking at for the first I've had it for like a year, and I've never used the research tab on YouTube to inform me about what videos I could be creating to fill in the gap according to the algorithm and the search stuff. Because most of the time I've looked at it when it first became available, and I saw a bunch of stuff in there because it shows you what your users, what your not your users, but what your audience is searching for across YouTube on a global basis, and you can filter it by country and all this other stuff. And most of the time, people were searching for things that were not topics that I wanted to cover. But recently, because there's so much out there around tabletop right now, like two of the big things are tabletop and world building for my audience. So I was like, well, I have expertise in both those areas, and I like doing those things, and I'm doing those things professionally anyway. I might as well cover them here on my channel and see how that works for the algorithm. So it's a win-win, hopefully. Um, but I don't talk about the art so much. I do talk about some of the artwork that went into it, but the art component is massive. I cannot understate how much artwork you need for a source book. And I'll be the first to admit that our artwork is very different than what you would see in a highly polished AAA production because this was a process where Chris was learning how to use a tablet as she went along and transitioning from um, pencil sketching and painting watercolors to digital art, and also her finally being able to pursue her hobby passion professionally for the first time ever. And so you can definitely see there was a learning curve, and so you can watch if you've for anybody who's been out there who's been around for a while. Well, we've done March of 2023 will be 2 years exactly on that project, and there's probably been 150 pieces of art that have been produced in that time span, not all of which are in the source book. A lot of those have been for Patreon posts and so on and so forth. A lot of those are book chapters because she does like Dragonlance, she does the black and white artwork for the book chapters on our Patreon page. She's way behind right now because we had to move and then the rescue cats and everything else. But um, it's been a place where she can grow as an artist in a safe environment where she's not being critiqued at the same level that you would be doing if you were working at like Wizards of the Coast or something. But also, those artists get paid significantly more because the quality of their artwork is much beyond what we're producing for our version. But I've never been one to believe that you have to have the absolute maximum quality of everything to produce a good piece of something for people to enjoy and get enjoyment out of. So it's been a lot of fun. But the artwork is there's a lot of stuff that goes in the artwork, and there's a ton of artwork. You're going to need more than one person. We ended up working with two additional individuals who did some contracting for us. And in a perfect world, we would be working with like 10 different artists, but that's huge budget stuff that we don't get into. In any case, let me finish reading the comments here. I got the legal side pretty much handled. KSCM has the repository and very supportive of their creators. Nice. There's so much charm in early D&D images. Love all that stuff. I also find the corporate illustrations a little alienating. It's too slick. Yeah, there's definitely an evolution to Dungeons and Dragons art too. If you go all the way back to those, black and white like paper stapled together in the basement, module things. The artwork has come a long way from those just like pencil sketches and pen sketches to where we are, for sure. I'm gonna go take a quick bio, everybody, and then we're gonna get back and I got a whole list of topics to cover this morning. And we're gonna be here for a while, so I need to take a quick bio because I had 3 cups of coffee and a glass of iced tea with my breakfast, and I got more coffee here, so we're gonna be a bit. I'll be right back. All right, we'll see if Smeagol's going to be a good boy or not. He's in play mode. He was at the door wanting to come in. So if he gets to be too much of a monster, I'll have to put him back out. Because we have the only door in the house in our place is to this office, so I have to the big 50-pound bag of cat food's in here, and one of the reasons he loves to come in here is because he'll get me distracted, and then when I'm distracted, he'll go over there and start trying to open up that cat food. Dun, dun. All right, see ya, Martine. Thanks for being here. Discovered your channel because of the OGL. We had a lot of people discover the channel because of the OGL, which is awesome. This has been I think it's been one of the best months of growth that I've had on this channel since I went full time last June. I think this month in particular, we had some really good growth last year because of the Rings of Power stuff and all the coverage and the Mondays in Middle Earth series. Hey, Smeagol, you're chewing on my feet, buddy. Crazy boy. Here, I'll show you guys what he's doing. He's literally down here on the other chair where I've got my feet propped up, and he's just like, he's not doing it now, but he's like rubbing all over and biting at my feet, being a little obnoxious. All right. So the other thing in this week's news was Critical Role. I probably need to recenter that a little bit. Critical Role just signed a massive multi-year exclusivity deal with Amazon Studios, and I cannot kind of overstate the importance of what this means. So Critical Role starts off as a group of voice actors in Los Angeles who get together and play Dungeons and Dragons in their spare time, right? And they have a lot of fun doing it. And because of their connections within the industry, they're able to, get into a position where they get an invitation to stream with Geek and Sundry, I believe, is where it started. If I'm not mistaken on my history of Critical Role. And at the time, they were playing Pathfinder at their home, based on a homebrew world. And then that became, well, we're going to stream it over here, and we're going to start using 5th edition because this is the way more recognizable edition that will get more eyes on it and everything else. Hey, are you being naughty with the map? Yes. Biting my hand like that. Monster. And then they just grew leaps and bounds. And, they've grown into this thing now where because of the popularity of Critical Role on their streams, they got more opportunities as voice actors, and deservedly so. Like, Perils of Eternity 2 Dreadfire has some of the best voice acting I've ever played through in a video game. And them being the cast that made that happen is pretty amazing. So to watch them grow as a channel, it's gone from just being streaming and tabletops and creation and everything else to now doing more video games and doing these other projects, and then getting the Kickstarter, right, to do this animated show based on Vox Machina. And it had a modest goal, and it blew past it and did whatever it was, like $12-13 million. I can't remember exactly what it was, so don't crucify me if I'm wrong on the numbers. And then Amazon picks it up and says, oh, you did such a good job with the Kickstarter, we want to be your partner. Because why wouldn't we want to be your partner? We can give you additional funding, make it bigger, host it on our platform, get you into season 2. Now they got a season 3 renewal out of that, and then boom, we get the news that exclusive multi-year first look deal with Critical Role at Amazon Studios. And this is so much more than just Critical Role. So the first announcement was they're bringing the Mighty Nine to Amazon as a series, just like Vox Machina. The Mighty Nine is a way more popular campaign, because as popular as season 1 of Critical Role's campaign was, Mighty Nine is the campaign that launched them into superstardom. And you can expect to see this go on for multiple seasons. But along with this was an exclusive overall television first look deal, which is super unique because it's going to be Critical Role using its production banner MetaPigeon to develop additional media ventures in television, films, and other content places. In addition to this, they are also going to be working with outside talent on additional projects within the MetaPigeon banner. right? So they're not just going to be focused. Uh-oh, did mommy come in? No, he's okay for now. He's been just attacking my arm and everything else. Do you see mama? Huh? Yeah, you can go ahead and take him. That way I don't have to get distracted because he's gonna go for the food bag in a moment. I'll turn on the air conditioner while I'm sitting here too. I need the flickering lights, ladies and gentlemen. We have bad wiring in this house that we're slowly replacing. That's what happens when you buy a 20-year-old property and fix it up. Um, so it's not going to be about just Critical Role things. This is also a bigger deal that's going to see them producing other pieces of content based on either pitches that are, I don't know if they're taking pitches or if they're going to have people bring, agents are going to bring ideas to them or not, but Critical Role is going to be producing additional television for Amazon that doesn't have anything to do with the worlds that they've created based on this overall deal, which is really just amazing news overall. It's just a really cool thing to see and to watch them evolve into leaps and bounds. It's also a unicorn scenario because so many people, myself included, like to look at Critical Role and say, wouldn't it be cool if we could mimic that success? That's very difficult to do because they have a lot of things going for them. One is the fact that they were all talented voice actors to begin with, and so their presentation. And someone said this on my YouTube channel the other day. They said, "I just don't see the allure of Critical Role because," and the guy even said, he's like, "I haven't watched that many of their episodes, but it seems to me like it's just people tuning in to watch them as opposed to watch a game. And I like Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to see D&D being played. I don't want to see a bunch of people perform." And I went, that's what you're missing, because the reason Critical Role is so popular is not because they're playing a specific game or a specific rule set. It's because they are entertainers. They are bards. They are theatrical performances. That's what has made them so popular. And if looking at the people who have mimicked their success, it's people who tend to be actors and voice actors. These are the campaigns that people will tune into, and it's because we want to watch people pretending and being entertaining. No one wants to sit around and watch a bunch of dudes, and only dudes, sit around a table and hash out rules and talk about, well, you can't move to that position because of the flanking, and if you did this instead of this, maybe you could do this, and don't forget that that's half cover, and so you're going to have a -3 penalty, and because of that over there, you're not going to be able to do this, and the AoE is going to be like this, and you're going to have to position because of this, and friendly fire, and all that rules shit does not make for entertaining streaming and television. What's entertaining is the voices and doing the faces and having fun and role playing and being the crazy old lady who's gonna rub your stuff and the crazy little halfling who's gonna steal things. That's what's entertaining to people. And so being able to do the voices and to do all of that stuff is what has brought that draw in. And so seeing animation shows and television shows, hopefully we get to see some live action stuff from them as well. That is all what pulls me to the table when it comes to Critical Role. So I'm really happy to see that happening this past week. Now, on top of and I got to turn dark mode off for Twitter. Paizo made an announcement, which I think I talked about this in yesterday morning's video. I think it's up to like 14,000 views or something. So this video from yesterday did really well on my channel, which is awesome. Thanks to everybody who joined because of it. When Wizards of the Coast and D&D announced that the SRD 5.1 was going into the wild and they were backing away from the OGL 1.0a, Paizo had this to say: "We welcome today's news from Wizards of the Coast regarding their intention not to deauthorize the OGL at 1.0a. We still believe, though, that there is a powerful need for an irrevocable, perpetual, independent, system-neutral open license that will serve the tabletop community via nonprofit stewardship. Work on the ORC license will continue with an expected first draft release for comment to participating publishers in February." Now, I'm a part of the Discord for the ORC Alliance, and I can say that I've seen very good things in the draft discussions. So I'm looking forward to seeing that draft. I have good faith because one of the things that I think that makes it most interesting to me, and remember, there's a distinction here. This is not a rule set. It's not a rule set. It's a license. It's literally independent, system neutral open license. Way too many people are confused about this. I see a lot of people coming on my YouTube's videos leaving comments like, well, I just don't know what rule set the ORC is going to adopt as the official rule. It's not. No, they're not adopting any rule sets. They are not adopting any SRDs. It's literally an independent system neutral open license. It's a place for people to pool their resources and support the tabletop community as a whole and find ways to better the industry and work together towards being able to publish as much amazing content as possible. But the SRDs and the rule sets that the individual companies decide to use are going to be up to them. There is not, as of this moment, based on my understanding of things, there is not any rule set going into the ORC Alliance. Again, independent, system neutral. That means no official systems are being put in place. More importantly for me is the fact that this is going to be guided by a law firm and then a nonprofit stewardship. Whereas with Wizards of the Coast, even though the SRD 5.1 being in the wild is a good first step, they still haven't put any irrevocable language in place for the OGL 1.0a, which means theoretically, if they wanted to, they could go back and change that if they wanted to. But here's the fun part about that. Who gives a shit? You no longer have to use the OGL 1.a if you don't want to. The reason that was a good deal beforehand was because it directly tied into the SRD 5.1. So if you wanted to use one, you had to use the other. They were tied together. They tied their rule set to their license. They have now separated the license out from the rule set. So you can now freely use that rule set for whatever you want, and you only use the license if you want to. And as far as I'm concerned, the only reason anyone would want to use that license would be if you were publishing things for the DM Guild. But the reality is that I think moving forward, what Wizards of the Coast is likely going to do, I'm predicting here, I don't know if this is going to be true, everybody, is more than likely they're going to make the new OGL that's tied to one D&D and D&D Beyond. They're probably going to make that a mandatory thing, so that if you want to publish for the DM's Guild, and you want to publish official licensed D&D content, then you're going to have to go through their new OGL and their new 1D&D system and go for it. I don't care. That's fine. That's what should have been done rather than trying to nuke the 1.0a. I'll never forget this as long as I live, because I have been out there being very magnanimous in my victory dances, and I've been saying, don't put the sins of the fathers at the feet of the son, because I don't believe that we should crucify Wizards of the Coast based on that they already did this once with 4th edition and they're doing it all over again. Different leadership. I talked about this early in the video. They're no longer here. The proof of that is already in the pudding. They're not here anymore because they couldn't make it work. The current leadership will eventually have to face the repercussions of their actions. But the reality is that the moment that they came out and said in that leaked draft that they wanted 25% earnings and a license back clause, I think that was the biggest holy shit fuck you moment that I've ever seen in any industry ever, where everyone kind of stood up and went, what? Are you freaking crazy? There's no way that that's real. And then it turns out it was freaking real. Like, it was absolutely legit. And the balls, I don't even know if it's the balls. I think it was, here's what I literally think it was. I think it's the audacity related to them having such a huge market share that they thought they couldn't lose. They literally said, we're on such a huge winning streak that everything we do is touched by gold. There's no way we can't succeed. So now it's time to tighten down and let's monetize this shit and take it from 1 billion to 5 billion. And I literally think they looked at that, and I think the management and everybody went and said, all right, let's do this. We can't lose. And then they did it. And when they did it in such a way that was done with absolute blinders on as to what got them there in the first place. And when everybody started reacting, I legitimately think someone at the top was like, because I remember some of the leaked emails that were coming out where people were like, the leadership seems very confused why the community is reacting this way, and behind the scenes they're talking about how the community is the one to blame for all this controversy. Why didn't the community like it and all this other stuff? And it's like there feels to me like there's a disconnect because the people at the top aren't tabletop people. The people at the top of Wizards of the Coast are microtransaction people who came from a corporate environment of microtransactions and making profit. That's all they care about is profit. And there's not, if I look at Paizo, Paizo is run by people who have been in the tabletop space for decades. And I'm not saying Paizo is the perfect company. Kobold Press is another good example. Green Ronin, right? These are all companies that are run by people who live and breathe tabletop. And because of that, the way they do business is centered around and focused around tabletop, what's good for tabletop and what's good for that environment. And at no point along the way have I seen any of that from the current management of Wizards of the Coast. So nothing against D&D. I love D&D, but it's the management that it's incredible to think that that ever was thought to be something that could go through. But in the meantime, hang on, I forgot I shouldn't switch tabs like that because you guys will all get blinded. Paizo has come out and said, well, we don't care that they're taking a step back. We're going to be continuing to on with the ORC, and I'm happy for that. I'm in that discussion. I can't wait to see the draft. It's going to be a good thing. Bubbaloni says, to be honest, I think a lot of people enjoy being confused by the ORC. Probably. Mark Cooper says, good morning. Good morning to you too as well, Mark. Appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Everybody else, thanks for being here. I'm going to do a quick commercial, everybody. If you haven't already done so, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. I am obviously continuing to talk about tabletop throughout the week. I'm now that we're in a better position to do so. Like I said, I'm opening things up and starting to show what we've been working on, the work that we've been doing for 2 years. So I've got some streams coming up this month. We're doing a big tabletop world building video Monday morning. It's about an hour long, detailing what went into the production of our source book and the first module. I've got a incarnate map making series coming out. I'll probably do a writing series talking about how I put together all of the chapters for book 1, which has been produced through our Patreon. We're going to be talking about that kind of stuff, but we're also going to be playing Starfinder coming up. My brother, myself, and some other people from our community and his friends as well. We're going to have a few people playing Starfinder very soon. And we're going to be, I think for the moment, we're going to be continuing to do these tabletop live streams every single Sunday morning at 8 a.m. because we've been getting really good. I mean, like right now says there's 32 people here. That's pretty good. That's an average day, which is pretty awesome to see 30 people here. Last week we had like 84 people. So for my channel, 84 people was like double the numbers we normally get. So it's really cool to see the growth and to see the people here. So thanks so much for that. And again, if you like what you see, you can do super chats. You can also join as a member. There's the Patreon page if you want to get involved with our tabletop stuff. There's also a point and click adventure game. I'll shut up now because I know some people are like, why are you spamming commercial shit? It's like, because I make a living on YouTube. I have to. So I'm a big fan of what the ORC is shaping up to be. I hope that it's going to be what I want it to be. I'm already interested enough in Starfinder and the rule set there that I think for the moment, I think I'm going to be spending my time as a player doing Starfinder for at least the rest of this year. I don't see a reason to switch away from that. I really like it. I'm going through the core rulebook. I'm doing that live here on the channel in those episodes, the Discovering Starfinder episodes. And I'm really loving the rule set that I've seen that Paizo has put together. And the way I understand it is that Starfinder is like a mix between Pathfinder 1 and Pathfinder 2, but it also has the ship combat. So it's got its own unique hybrid thing going on as well. And then when we see what we're going to see, because Kobold Press is working on the rule set, and we don't know, because is Pathfinder going to develop a new rule set, or are they going to stick with second edition for the foreseeable future, or are they going to adopt Kobold Press's rule set when it comes out? I don't know any of those. I don't have answers to any of those questions yet. So when I know more, I will then be starting to focus on, where do I go next from a personal perspective. Now with our stuff, I've made it system agnostic so that it's just a source book now with a bunch of lore in it and an adventure that you can run that you can adapt for any system. I've just stripped all the rule stuff out of it. There's some brief mentions still that I need to continue editing out of like D20 stuff, but that could be applied to many different D20 systems, and it's just a reference guide to say this is how you could do it, but there's also other ways. Welcome to the channel, Stephen McCoy. So once I know more about what Cobalt Press is doing, and as I get deeper into Starfinder, Pathfinder, rule sets, everything else, I may end up liking the Pathfinder rule set so much that we just adopt that rule set for our ongoing adventures in our own tabletop world. But I may end up choosing the Cobalt Press Black Flag thing that's being produced. Don't know yet. Remains to be seen. Paizo also has. God, I need to go back into dark mode. I apologize for blinding people. Paizo had a really interesting post on their website the other day about how they sold 8 months of books in 2 weeks. So this is the press release they dropped on their blog this past Thursday, a few days ago. Thank you for the kind words these last few days, for the overwhelming support of our product and our open gaming sale. It's been a critical hit. Our warehouse was inundated with multiple weeks worth of orders. We have brought in additional hands to help with shipping and are working overtime to connect you to new Pathfinder and Starfinder print products as quickly as possible. We apologize for longer than normal ship times as we work through the queue. Additionally, we have run through what was an 8-month supply of our Pathfinder core rulebook in the last 2 weeks, and demand on our beginner boxes is surging as well, along with other titles. We have already ordered another print run of the hardcover core rulebook, which will arrive in mid-April, and in the interim, we have some supply of the pocket edition still available. However, Pathfinder still exists in many forms. See links below. And as far as PDFs go, that's the camp that I'm in. Yeah, sorry, it looked like my screen went dark for a minute. I was double checking that the stream was still up. So, yeah, Pathfinder and Paizo have been doing very well, and I imagine most people are going to Pathfinder because they're coming over from D&D and they want another fantasy thing. But for me, I've only ever done fantasy, other than a brief stint with Star Wars in the 90s. So I'm really looking forward to the Starfinder thing. And also, which I've announced this on my channel too, my brother and my nephew are going to be playing through I'm going to run the West End Games Star Wars RPG for them soon-ish. My little nephew is 7 years old. We've been playing Minecraft with him on Saturday nights for like a year and a half now, and we're getting ready to graduate into tabletop for the first time. And we're going to run a Star Wars campaign because he loves Star Wars. Yeah, Bubbaloni, it was a huge win for Paizo. Also, yeah, for pretty much everybody else, which gets us into beyond the Roll20 and One Bookshelf merger was the emergence of the European RPG Studios Union. So this is one of those things where it's not just what's happening with Paizo and the ORC and those 1,500 plus companies and Cobalt Press's Black Flag and Roll20 evolving with One Bookshelf and Critical Role doing this and the other. There's so much happening in the table space right now. I feel like we're currently in like a golden age of emergence where, tabletop has been rising in popularity like the last 10 years, let's say. 8 to 10 years, and really started getting into the public eye about 6-8 years ago because of Critical Role and these other companies who were starting to come into the spotlight. And then it became even bigger a few years ago because then it was in Stranger Things, and it became this huge thing of like, oh my God, do you remember this game from back days? Yeah, let's do it. It's this. They go Google it and they're like, oh my God, it's popular now, and so everyone's wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons and getting into tabletop, and there's nothing wrong with that. But because of the market share, people are mostly familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. I talk about this in like the last week and a half of my videos. I'm very open about the fact that I was a Dungeons and Dragons baby for 30 plus years, and I'm not ashamed of that, and it's not something to criticize either. Because here's the thing. I have gotten thousands of hours of entertainment out of Dungeons and Dragons. Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms. I can't tell you how many hundreds of novels I've read at this point between Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms. Even if I haven't ran all of their campaigns, I've played all the video games. I've read almost all of the books that ever were published between those two franchises. Less Forgotten Realms than Dragonlance. Dragonlance is my baby. Forgotten Realms. I know, like Liam from Liam's Lyceum is more into Forgotten Realms. Those worlds and those rules and everything else kept us going for a very long time. But the one thing that I can say that's really good about all of this is because the fact that all of this competition has bred innovation of people trying to figure out new ways to claw their way up to the top. And because of that, we're seeing lots of cool new stuff come out. In particular, now that the OGL controversy hit, it kind of was like, before we had a nice slow momentum building up, and now it just went, and the top of that volcano just blew off, and now there's lava spewing, all over the place, and we've got a plume cloud, and that's spreading out, and it's like, that's tabletop right now. We just exploded. And now it's going to be this time period of, I'd say we got the next 2 to 5 years are just going to be people creating. And that's going to be a pretty amazing time to live in because of all of those creative juices and the creative vibes that are going to be going on around the world as so many people put their efforts into trying to rise to the top. And we're going to be sifting through that cream and figuring out which are the which new tabletop products, which new tabletop source books, which new tabletop rules, which new alliances are going to be the ones that produce the best stuff. And because of that, we're gonna have a glut of new content coming out over the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years would be my estimation. And it's a huge win, like Bubbaloni said, not just for Paizo, but lots of others at various levels of win. That's why I said that, Bubbaloni, was because your comment was that's the longer version of his comment. With the RPG Studios Union being one of the big things that has happened because of this, because um, a lot of people like to talk shit about unions. I'm not one of them, and here's why. I worked non-union when I worked construction, so I'm a third generation, was a third generation ceramic tile and natural stone contractor. That's all I knew. My grandpa did it, my uncles did it, my dad did it, my cousins went into it. I did it for 20 years. I retired when I was 28, but I'd been working on job sites from the time I was 5 years old and could push a broom and throw trash in a dumpster. Um, and my we were never union, and I have friends who are in the union in construction, and I say this because it applies across construction to film, television, and beyond. Unions can create headaches, but they can also create very good benefit systems for the workers in ensuring that everyone gets treated fairly and everyone gets the best possible outcome. And it can cause slowdowns in production. What's up, Sean? No worries. We're still going for a little bit more. It can cause delays in production, but I think the benefit is that you get so much. Like, I don't get a pension because I never worked union, and that's something that I'm very disappointed with. Had I gone into a trade as an electrician, as an example, I would have been able to get into a union, and after 20 years in the industry, I would, there's benefits from that, and I don't get any of that because I spent 20 years working in an industry where I was non-union and I have no pension because of that. So I'm a big fan of unions for that reason alone, but also because looking at what happened with the Last of Us launch on HBO, you have a co-creator of the series who is not being given credit on the show, even though he was a co-creator of the characters. He was a co-creator of the Last of Us game. He worked at Naughty Dog for like 18 years. He's not getting any credit on the show because he's not with the company, and they parted on terms that were less than pleasant. And so they just decided, well, we're not giving him credit. If there was a union in place, that type of shit can't happen. Everybody who works on something is required to be given a credit. Everyone gets paid for their time. There's more protections in place. And Paizo, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Paizo's um, employees unionized last year, the year before. I know it was recently. I think they unionized, and we're seeing unions crop up across the video game industry as well now. And I think that that's a good thing. And so when I look at what the European RPG Studios Union is trying to do, I'm a firm supporter of that. And I had some people making I feel like they were very ignorant comments about communism. And it's like, this has nothing to do with communism. This is about finding a way to protect freelancers and get them rights so that when they go work for a studio in the European space, they're getting insurance and fair wages and everything else. And I talked about this in the video. Like, I use I use contractors for a lot of different stuff because it's cheaper. Why wouldn't I want to use someone who lives in Poland or Brazil and who's going to work for $500 versus someone from the US who's going to want 3,000? Not only do I pay a hell of a lot less, I don't have to pay insurance, I don't have to pay any of those things in terms of uh, production. So it's a huge thing to come up with a union where we can ensure that if someone is like, if I were to hire somebody from, if I'm living in the United States and I'm going to hire for somebody from the United States, there are a lot of people who are on contracting in the United States in a country where the cost of living is normally high and the health insurance is horrible, right? It's expensive. and no one wants to pay for health insurance because it's so expensive. And so if there was a union that was ensuring that people got health insurance when they got hired to work locally, that's a good thing. That is a win. So I'm happy to see unions like this spreading because it ensures that people get treated fairly at the local level. Now it's still not going to combat, and this is the thing, I will openly say that in a perfect world, me paying someone $500 for a piece of art that someone else is going to charge $3,000 for, in a perfect world, that scenario wouldn't exist. Because in a perfect world, we would have a universal income and a universal currency which would lock down rates for services on an international global scale, but that doesn't exist. It's impossible in the current era that we live in. That just isn't going to fly. So until that point, we just need to make sure that people get fair working conditions when they are working. And that's why I will happily support unions when they crop up for those local workers. Sean says, my friend was a gaming programmer back in the 80s and 90s. He worked crazy hours and took a toll on him later in life. I'm sure if he could do it all over again, he would belong in a union. If I could do my construction years all over again, I would absolutely say screw this and go join an electrician's guild and get in the union, because everybody I know who started off when I started off and stuck with that and is now in their 40s and they're career union guys, they're they're making $100,000 plus a year with full bennies, and they've got matching pensions, and their retirement is completely set. Like they're set for life. Learning a trade is a big thing, but also getting into a union as a tradesman is a big thing. But this is why I would argue for trades. I would argue for unions in every industry, because if you're putting 20 years into a career, you should be getting something out of it. If you've given a company 20 years, then they need to fucking pay up and support you, with some sort of a pension or something. Um, I know that's a weird conversation to have as a part of tabletop, but that's because of what's happening because of all this controversy. We've got unions that are stepping up now to potentially form, and they're doing a lot more than just that. The European RPG Union is also pitching to universities and trying to get recognition for tabletop creators and artists and writers and so on and so forth. In the same way that there are video game classes being taught now, you can go to college now and learn game design and get a degree in game design. And so they're fighting for degree systems in tabletop creation as well, which I think is a cool thing. It'd be really cool to be able to go to school and get a degree in, tabletop game design, tabletop publishing, all are applicable things. My coffee is cold, ladies and gentlemen, and we've been going for an hour and a half almost. So I think if anybody has any questions, comments, etc., feel free to ask them down below. But I have run through all of my news and topics of the week in this week's episode, which was This Week in Tabletop, WoTC, D&D, ORC, and this week's TTRPG was the title of this week's episode. We will be back again next week, same time, same place at 8 a.m. Bubbleonia says he has a terrible union experience with AT&T 20 years ago, and I still 100% unions. Good for the EU. Yeah, I mean, you could still have bad experience and support something. That's a mature way of looking at life. That's also why I don't want to crucify Wizards of the Coast. Even though we've had a bad experience with them at the OGL, I'm not willing to boycott them because there's still lots of good stuff and there's tons of innocent people. Actually, today I have to record a video. I'm covering the firings. If you haven't already watched it, go over to Slandered Gaming's YouTube channel. I've linked it a couple times in comments, but go over to his YouTube channel, and he's got a video that he put out a couple days ago. I think it's called "This Isn't the Win Everyone Thinks It Is" or something like that. But he talks about how Hasbro's stock was falling for quite a while before this controversy because of the Magic the Gathering stuff that was going on, and how they were overvaluing those cards and manipulate. Basically, an analyst came out and said that the stock wasn't worth the value that people claimed it was because of all this manipulation that was happening, and because there's been no customer growth. There's just been increased monetization of the existing customer base. So if you don't have a customer base that's expanding, your company isn't actually growing, and that means that you're stagnant. And if you're stagnant, then the stock prices should be going down, not going up. And because of that, the stock prices were going down. Anyway, it was a very damning analysis, and right as all this shit hit the fan with the OGL, Hasbro announced that they fired 1,000 people. And the sucky thing is like those 1,000 people, I guarantee, no benefits, no, they got thrown out in the cold, no unionization. They maybe probably got a 2 or 3 month severance pack, which is probably all they got. I haven't looked into it, so I can't confirm. Don't yell at me if I have that incorrect. But 1,000 people lost their jobs. That's not a win, and that's related to a lot more than you know just Wizards of the Coast. It's Hasbro. It's people. Inflation's up. People don't have any money to be spending on expensive hobbies, comparatively speaking. Um, I, on as we're closing down here, I posted a photo I think yesterday. I was showing because Chris had me dig out the camera and do a photo shoot for our chicken coop and eggs and everything else for the homesteading channel, and I put a picture up here on this channel yesterday of like Chris holding a bowl of eggs in front of our chicken coop, and I went to I just was like I feel like a millionaire because of eggs, because in the United States the cost of eggs is it's astronomical. Meanwhile, we get eggs, we get a couple eggs a day from our hens. We have new chickens growing. We bought a dozen eggs yesterday. I think it was $1.50 for a dozen eggs. Not quite a dollar. It was $1. Sorry, it was $1 for a dozen eggs. So it's way cheaper where we're at to buy eggs than it is in the United States. Um, because right now people are paying ridiculous amounts of money for eggs. Yeah, ours are costing 8 cents per egg, um, which is I think I saw someone put a screenshot up of the Costco where they're at, and or not Costco, Walmart, and eggs were 54 cents per egg. 54 cents per egg to buy an egg. Ours cost about 8 cents per egg where we live. So we don't often have to buy eggs. Chris and I actually talked about this today. Yesterday was the first time we bought eggs in a month. And the reason was because we had really heavy rains for like 3 days. And as a result, our chickens didn't lay as many eggs as they normally did. So we were only getting like one egg a day. And we eventually ran out of our stock. And so we had to go buy eggs yesterday to be able to make breakfast. But we have a third hen growing up now and a couple of meat roosters that'll be ready in about 4 months. With a third hen, we should be able to stay ahead of surplus even if one of them doesn't lay an egg for a day. We'll probably end up getting up to 4 or 5 egg layers long term, but people getting hit with layoffs right now in the times that we live in is not good. What's up, Chris? I'm wrapping up. Do you want to say bye or anything? Anybody? Oh, Frodo's coming in. Do we have to do anything? When are you going to draw a new piece of art? Ah, I'm putting her on the spot now. You haven't had time because of the cats, and then the chickens, and then building the chicken coops, and building all the other stuff. Well, she will have some new artwork out though. We were talking about the other day. She has time to get back into drawing now for the moment, and we've got new stuff coming out for the tabletop. So, um, eggs from our neighbor for about 9 cents. Yeah, that's about what we're paying slightly less than that, Mark. If you want to get cheap eggs, go direct to the source. Bubbaloni says there's a big layoff contagion effect in tech right now. I've seen a lot of posts on TikTok. Yeah, failing leadership. Frodo, do you want to come here and say hi, Frodo? No, you're Twitter pated with the food bag. Anyway, folks, stay tuned. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, do all those things that you need to do. Join if you can. Memberships are below. Thanks for the super chat earlier, Babylonia. Thanks to those of you who are members and supporting. There's Chris. We're gonna say bye and head out. Oh, there's Frodo. You want to come say hi real quick, Frodo, before we go? Come here. Rawr. It's a big baby. Meow. Meow. You smell like talcum powder. Did you put the flea medicine on them? Yeah, they had to get flea medicine because Chris woke up with flea bites the other day, and we haven't had any issues for like 2 months. So it's time to flea match. Wonder how close to the margin that is for them. I hope they're making something. We'll see. Here you go, Chris. You want to take him? Anyway, I gotta go do a Patreon post, everybody, because my brother got me some screenshots this morning. So I'm gonna go get a. There's gonna be an update for the point and click adventure game this morning over on Patreon. Thanks everyone for hanging out this morning. I will be back next week, same time, same place at 8 a.m. to talk tabletop. We'll be doing more stuff this week for all the tabletop stuff. Don't forget tomorrow's video on tabletop world building and the new series on incarnate map making and stuff. I'll have all that stuff coming out this week. Plus, we've got ongoing coverage of this stuff as it continues to unfold. As new stuff hits with the ORC Alliance, I'll be reporting on that. I'm involved with that. I'm in the Discord. I'm loving what I'm seeing. And as soon as we get our Starfinder campaign up and going, we'll make that available to everybody as well. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have a good day. I'll catch you on the flip side. Until next time, everyone, stay safe. Happy gaming.